we've only just begun.
It won't come as a surprise to anybody that in the last decade we have seen business transformation at an unprecedented rate. The impact of new technology, generational shifts, and the spiralling pace of business and economic change have combined to create a whole new level of challenge for talent, leadership development, and capability strategy. It's fair to say we're in the middle of a perfect talent storm. But what's the right approach moving forward? Well, fortunately today we have a lineup here, a fantastic panel of senior leaders in the industry who are going to help us answer those questions about leading into the next decade. Before I ask them to introduce themselves, I'd just like to say that we'll be accepting questions for the panel via Twitter, via the hashtag, if you'd like to just tweet throughout the session using the IB Engage hashtag. Okay, so you could quickly introduce yourselves.
Yeah, I'll go first.
Oh.
Yeah, hi.
You go.
Hi, I'm Uminski from a mobile solutions company called Somo.
I'm Jenny Bullis. I run a division of Omnicom Group called Annalect Solutions, looking at data and technology.
I'm Paul Hayes. I'm the Managing Director of News UK Commercial.
And I'm Kathleen Saxton. I'm the Chief Executive of the Lighthouse Company, and we look after all chief executives in the media industry.
Okay, so each panelist is going to lead on a question. So I'm going to kick off with Paul. And sort of what actions do you believe are necessary to transform a traditional legacy business so it's fit for purpose in the digital age? And obviously you've undergone and overseen an enormous period of change down at News UK. You could enlighten us there.
I think for us there are three key things that we're constantly trying to do. One is reframe the business. The second is invest, and the third is communicate. Reframe the business in 2009. My sector was experiencing a perfect storm. You had a global financial crisis. You had historically high demand decreasing for the print space, and you had the rise of free online news in real time. The reframing of the business was we have to think about ourselves as a content and audience business, and I think we got, certainly my sector, got too obsessed with our distribution channel, which was print, as opposed to our core purpose, which is the prolongation of journalism. And I think actually to reframe the business and say we're about engaged audiences across multiple platforms, that's been very important. I think the invest part of it is that if you do reframe your business, don't think about it as was. And again, I think a lot of legacy businesses, not a term I love, but legacy businesses started to cost cut. If you believe that your business can reframe itself and have a future, you have to invest in that future. And for us, it's been around investing in delivery systems, investing in sales and trading, investing in strategy and research and training. And you have to believe that you're going to get a return on your investment because you're going to put your business into a different space. And the communication is, we have about 3,500 people in our business across the UK. You have to constantly over-communicate with those people to say, we are no longer the business that we used to be, we are this business now. And that means things are changing. Some things will stay the same, some will change. You have to get used to a changing environment and a changing context. We're going to take risks that maybe 5 or 10 years ago we wouldn't take. If they fail, that's okay. And I think it's a constant battle in our organisation because you have a bunch of journalists, for example, who have been used to working in one way for a long time. Take it, for an example, they'll be deadline driven. Back in the day, your deadline was 10 o'clock, that was it. Now you're a journalist, you're a 24-hour journalist. You're tweeting, you're blogging, and so on. And that becomes very work intensive and difficult for them. And you have to support them in what they're doing and train them as well. And I think if you can do all of those things, and I think in our sector, we conceive of ourselves as news brands, not newspapers. The news bit, we never were about news. Even when radio was invented, newspapers weren't about news. We're about interpretation, and we're about intelligent interpretation of what's going on in the world. I think going across channels is the key for us. And I'm glad you've asked the question in the way it's been asked, because I think it's not, again, for my sector, it's not print against digital. No. They're just distribution channels. And that, if you remember that, it helps you reframe the business.
Sure. Can you provide an example of the most difficult challenge you faced in the transformation, in the change process?
Charging for our websites. For our journalists, their view was, in a world where news is free, how can we charge? And the response was, have content worth charging for. So for it, that very much drove our decision to buy Premier League clip rights, to buy cricket clip rights, rugby clip rights, because our view is that in a world, how do you differentiate yourself in a world where free is the norm and you become worth paying for? You have to invest in those things that make you worth paying for. And that's worked for us. We're a season and a bit into Premier League rights, for example. And some of the numbers that are emerging are very, very encouraging. And it gives the content creators a reason to believe that they have something worth paying for. And we are, one of our key strategic principles is we're resolutely paid for. We don't believe in content for free.
Do you find this chimes with sort of, searching and recruiting into traditional businesses?
Yeah, I think, well, I just want to talk about the investment point. I think there's lots of newspaper brands that we're all aware of who've all had to try and go through this transformation that Paul and his business have, but I think some have been less successful than Paul's because they haven't truly invested. And actually, if your shareholders aren't prepared to take the hit for a couple of years while you try and transition that business, whether it's through journalists or technology or even the commercial people that you have in and around the business, then I think you're very unlikely to be able to do it, particularly if your back-end technology is a bit shonky and you're going to have to really invest in it. So I think we've seen a number of businesses talk about that, and as a headhunter, often the chief exec will come to me and say, I'm looking for a new commercial director to try and fix my woes because I need to transition my legacy inventory into digital inventory. It's not as simple as that. It's the whole business transformation. And I think leaders like Paul have to lead by example, which is we have to invest. We can't cut costs through it. So it does cause us a challenge as headhunters, but the investment piece, I think, is the most critical, particularly for news brands.
I think there's an emotional investment that you have to make as well as financial.
Yeah.
Because if you don't make that emotional investment, it can be quite superficial and it doesn't carry you through that really hard period of change.
Excellent. So very interesting insight there. I'm just going to move to the next question. This is one for Jenny to lead on. It's it's regarding the diversity of disciplines and skills within the digital industry and whether this has actually made career movement more challenging. Now, Jenny, you've spent, obviously prior to your back in agencies again, but you spent a long time on the brand marketing side. It'd be great if you could give us some insight.
I think that there has been an enormous growth in the type and definition of digital roles that have actually come through and I think that there is a greater range of digital positions, so we see anything from digital generalists to increase in vertical specialisms. And if you've got an increase in the type of roles available, it actually means that the market opportunity is widening. So I think the diversification is a good thing. I really do. I think there's a digital role out there for every type of digital skill now. The thing that concerns me is the more specialist the digital skills are defined, the more we reinforce the silos. Yeah. And digital silos is, I believe, truly bad for business because I think, back to Paul's point, it means that you can't actually rise above that trench of that discipline. And I really would like to see a time when digital experience is on the path, a requirement on the path to becoming a CMO, much like in many of the corporations that I've worked in, where marketing is a rotation on the path to general management. So if we can, I genuinely look forward to a generation of CMOs that started in digital, because if they carry the digital attitude through to them into a much more general management environment, I think we really will move into an era of truly marketing in a digital time, as opposed to, sadly, the offline marketing and the online marketing that we really are still seeing.
Yeah. Do you see this prevalent within agencies as well as
I think agencies have come a long way because they're operating at both ends of the scale simultaneously. So on one side, my role is to develop the future, is to keep an eye on what's coming and actually to do the most advanced digital advertising, digital marketing that you can do, and actually plan for our business, where our business is going to be going. And at the other side, we can be dealing with brands who are just trying to get into digital for the first time. So it's operating at both ends of the scale, and sometimes you do have to make the decision of do you run to advanced digital and bypass the baby steps, because actually, if you haven't even made that move yet, you're so far behind. Just run immediately to the advanced answer. I think that allows people with advanced digital skills a really diverse opportunity of experience, because on one side you can be dealing in super complex, very advanced, future-facing activity, and on the other side you can flex your softer skills, which is actually persuasion, understanding about brands, understanding about business and change. And I think digital people learning those softer skills is really important to get them out of their digital silos.
Learning how to be.
Yeah.
Does this sort of chime with you, Carl?
Yeah,
As a mobile specialist.
Yeah, I think right now, today, when it comes to career movement, we're at the best time ever. Digital is opening up so many opportunities because never before we had so many startups, legacy businesses that we had, as we said in question 1, and also, traditional digital businesses have been around for a number of years now. So if you want to get up and move into a completely different sector, want to go into a completely different role, I think there is so much movement now, particularly in the UK today, where we're seeing the startup economy really rising as well. And people want those different skills, and they want to take you from other industries and other areas. And for me personally, I can't hire the best mobile specialist who've got 10 years experience or the best social or whatever else. I need really, really smart people from wherever they've been and come on the journey and learn the discipline on the job. And they may want to learn another discipline in 2 years' time. Bring it on and do it.
It's really important that the specialists take responsibility for their own ambition and their own careers and not self-limit. And that you get someone who's great at PPC, their soft skill is they're probably an incredible tactician. A great social media manager is someone who has such an acute sensitivity to people. And these are really valuable soft skills that you can take above and beyond your silo and are highly valuable in any marketing general management role.
I think, I'm not sure I agree with the premise of the question. I think we're in an era now where individuals can articulate value add in a way that perhaps they couldn't before. And all organisations in a world which is complex are looking for those individuals who can add value. 5 years ago, I recruited my first econometrician. Last year, I recruited my first robotics graduate. And that's and I probably am. and next year I'll be recruiting God knows what. But do you know what's all of those people have in common? They can come along and articulate the value they can add to a business, and that's going to mean that their careers are terrific, not challenging.
But isn't that because in your business you've made that change and you're being far more progressive? But in many traditional legacy businesses, they're still saying, I want to hire someone in that role or that role. And actually, the role is actually less relevant now.
Yes,
it's actually about the skill set.
Well, I think
you've made that change, right?
Well, I think Kathleen's point is a good one. A lot of people in the publishing sector, in the widest sense, have a strategy which we'll do for next week. You've got to have a strategy that you're going to follow for the next 3 to 4 years, and you've got to be able to say, when I need to diversify from that strategy and go about it in a different way, I'm going to do that. But you've got to first of all state what business are we in.
And that's a challenge for your senior team as well.
Very much, it is.
And it goes back to the investment piece, because a lot of these skills really don't exist, actually. And you can recruit for functional skills, but those other elements that make them great business leaders, you have to home grow. So the investment is also a human investment as well, and a time investment into those individuals to get them to pay back, because their skill is very valuable.
Kathleen.
There's also an element where I think as individuals, whether you're at leadership level or coming up and through the ranks, you have to deal with the ambiguity. We were talking this in the green room. You have to deal with the fact that you may come for a functional role, but actually other things may be added to that as you go. And you have to just learn to live with that and work with that. But what comes also on the other side of that is much more fluid careers. So we're finding people that are coming up through the generations, and the millennials are not looking for a long-term job with you for 10 years. If you get them for 2 years and they do a fabulous job for you, then be lucky that you had them for that long. And at the Lighthouse, we did a survey last year. We called it Love on Loan, and it was all about, are you willing to just have someone almost on loan for you for a period of time who will do a brilliant job? But I think millennials are looking to have lots of different experiences around the world in different companies, very lateral thinking individuals. And we have to, if we're leaders in businesses, we have to be ready to hire those people with a different heart, almost. Yeah.
It's worth not losing that point about the expectations of the millennials.
Yeah.
When I recruited that robotics graduate, I was very clear I wasn't interviewing him, he was interviewing me. Because he was deciding whether he wanted to come to my organisation. And I don't expect him, I think Kathleen's right, if he stays a couple of years, we'll have got great value out of him and he'll move on.
Excellent. Your points are leading me to the next question, which I'm going to pose to Carl, in that the tech savviness of Generation Y combined, or millennials as they're known, combined with senior management's potential resistance to change can lead to organisational conflict. And what steps do you believe could be taken to avoid this?
Well, first of all, the senior management have to embrace this and embrace this change, and I think we've covered a bit of that already now. For me, when you look at Gen Y, are they actually, are they tech savvy? I think for me, they're actually tech users, and they're using multiple different devices, different screens, and able to use, and if anything, probably multitask a lot. I'd say it's probably Gen X and probably baby boomers are actually the most tech savvy, because they've built most of the tools today that are out there that they're using. But I think when you're in an organisation today and you're trying to embrace these people using different technology, you have to look at that and say, you know, let's embrace those different movements. Let's look at the tools they're using. Let's not push them back and say, you know, you can't do that, you have to do this instead. And actually how we've solved that within our business is if we've created something called a chipboard. And the chipboard is basically, I think it's about 12 people across the business who are almost represent Gen Y. We don't actually say that necessarily.
Like a junior Gen Y board.
Yeah, and they sit with us in the board of the business, and they are the voice of the people across the business who've got different ideas that you can look at and different approaches to doing business. And if you take these things on board and have a senior team around you who are able to qualify and get it right and actually organise within the business, you can have a really successful team. And that's all it's about, really, is successful teams that can gel together to bring the best out of the business.
Cool.
I think there's been a bit of a tidal wave, though, that I've seen as a headhunter, which is if you have been in a senior management position and you haven't embraced digital by now, you are really in danger of losing your step in your career, because when we're looking for chief executives now of organisations, we do absolutely value wisdom and experience and people that have gone up and through several recessions. All of those things are still incredibly valuable and they shouldn't be dismissed. But if you haven't lent into the digital age by now, I would be very concerned about putting you on a shortlist for a chief executive's position or a commercial director or a managing director for that matter. And I think that there are a number of people who just didn't really embrace it, and you're seeing them falling off and out of our industry right now, which is quite terrifying for them. And we are losing some of their experience when that happens. But you know, harshly, more for them for not keeping up with what was going on.
So you're kind of saying that the CEO who led an organisation through the recession may not necessarily be the same CEO who, you know, leads them into the digital
Yeah, it depends
future.
on their digital knowledge. I think, you know, leading a business through a recession is one of the hardest things you will do, and it's a great test of your management. It's more about how curious you were and how brave you were to embrace digital quite some time ago. And if you didn't do it, I'm very concerned. We work for, I know Bruce may still be here, we work for Twitter, for example, and Bruce will say to me, I don't want to see anybody being sent for interview that hasn't done something in digital. If they haven't done it by now, that's a concern for me.
It's de facto. But you can also take it too far the other way. And I had a great example where I think it was last Easter where, you know, all I wanted was 150 Easter eggs brought into the business for the employees. And after 3 days, the team was still searching online trying to find the best place to buy them from. Yet Tesco's downstairs sells bleeding Easter eggs. So, you know, but no one actually went downstairs and said to the store manager, can I have 150 Easter eggs? You know, so you can go a little bit too far the other way, especially while WhatsApp's going off and Facebook's going off and all this stuff, you know, where it's actually focus on the job as well and get it done quickly.
To build on Kathleen's point, there is a lovely trait, I think, with millennials and Generation Y, which is their curiosity. And it's something that I find digital people are so good at, is that curiosity piece, to keep learning and to have no fear of the unknown and to never profess to know everything. And I think that our CMOs and our business leaders would be better if they maintain their curiosity, they maintain that ability to keep learning and have no fear of the unknown.
I think, Paul, we've spoken about curiosity before and how important it's a very important characteristic, and it's not an age thing as such with digital, it's all attitudinal.
I think the best case study, one of the best business case studies I've ever read was about Nespresso and how Nestle launched it. And they were going to launch it through Nescafe. The guys at Nescafe just couldn't bring themselves to believe that the freeze-dried coffee market was going to go into decline. And so they had to set up a separate company called Nespresso to make sure that they could launch it. It's one of the great success stories of this decade. So you either say, I totally agree with your point about curiosity. We either have a management team who is curious and wants to change things, or we have to set up competing teams.
Okay. Leads on quite nicely to question 4. This is one for Kathleen. As to what are the key personal characteristics needed to become a successful either a leader or a business or a transformer of a digital business?
I'm going to upset you now, because I believe leadership is leadership. And I think whatever kind of business you're leading, it's about the skills that you have as a leader. There is no doubt that the world is faster and more connected and more impatient and more complex and all of those good things. But I do think that the leadership piece is around the characteristics that you hold, and you know, it is about bravery, and it is about curiosity, and it is about the ability to communicate a very strong vision for your individuals within an organisation. However, I don't think, and some people get confused sometimes when we talk about digital leaders, about it being an age thing, and it really, really isn't. So there's a couple of businesses that we work with at the moment that I think are really good examples of it doesn't matter age or stage. So for example, if you think about Mashable, so Pete, I know they were doing that upfronts this week as part of the IB Engage. So Pete Cashmore is now 29. He set the business up when he was a lot younger than that in his bedroom. But his chief commercial officer globally is a guy called Seth Rogen, who came from the New York Times. He came from a traditional, if you like, legacy, what was a legacy business in publishing. And he's certainly in his, I'd say, hopefully early 40s. But actually, as a combination, they're lethal in a really, really good way, because you've got super, super sharp tech brain on one hand, who's a visionary. He can see things that some of us can't even imagine to dream up in a dark room on our own. And you've got Seth, on the other hand, who's mega connected, incredibly experienced, very commercial, who can actually translate the vision that Pete has. And I think that's a good example of different people. In the UK, and I'm sure there might be someone here from Fetch, we work with Fetch as well over here. So you've got Declan, only just 40, you've got James, who's still in his 20s, driving his scooter, and you've got the gorgeous Greg Grimmer, who's obviously joined them, and I'm sure I've been to his 50th birthday, I'm sure he's at least 50. But so you've got, again, you're bringing together wisdom, but you're bringing together new smarts, coding, technology, all of those things, and I think it's finding this leadership piece is around sometimes combinations of those people as well, to bring the very best of knowledge to the market.
Okay, do you find that candidate expectations of a leadership role align with what the client needs for their business? I mean, we've spoken about sort of equity before and the expectation of that. If you could...
Again, controversially, the Lighthouse last year did another piece of research, and we called it the equity epidemic. And I think that equity is very prevalent in the digital world, and to great effect. I'm sure Stephen Haynes is delighted about his equity. However, there are some businesses that give equity to a huge amount of their people, which is very motivating. But on the other hand, as a headhunter, I see people that stay in big businesses, I'll name some, Google, Facebook, Yahoo, for quite a long time. And actually my question to them is, have you got the very best talent still after 10 years in that business? Are you refreshing enough? And that's quite controversial, but I'm saying it as someone who interviews, and our business probably interviews 4,000 or 5,000 people a year, so we have a very good vantage point on the talent in the marketplace. And I'm just questioning sometimes, is the equity always the very best motivation? Maybe to attract it, but are you keeping the wrong people for too long, would be my question.
Okay.
I think that model you mentioned there as well is what we've seen in Silicon Valley for the last 10 years in terms of, you know, you've got the young guys starting up the businesses, and then they bring in the chairman or someone senior wrapped around them to basically give them the business knowledge. And I think that's where you see that that's leadership in digital. And it's funny because it's so broad when you talk about digital in that sense. But for me, one of the biggest things in today's digital is change. You know, you have to be able to handle rapid change. Probably the fastest change you've ever had to do, I think, in the last, well, for me, definitely in the last 10 years. Maybe it's just I'm just getting older, but it's getting bloody harder with mobile and everything else. So, you know, you've got to be able to move fast. And then also, I think, you know, you've got to think differently all the time and think differently about, you know, what else is around the corner and you know, and just, yeah.
Okay. I think we may have time for a couple of questions, or at least one. So I think we've been asking you to tweet them through. So Tim, if you could bring me the Twitter.
Wow, this is digital.
Very digital. Writing them on paper is very safe.
Bring it on.
Okay.
There's an app for that.
Question from Steve Ricketts. When is it right to actively retire the legacy business and grow a new one? So I don't know who would like to kick off on that one.
Sorry, Steve, I'm not sure I agree with the premise in the question. I think if you reframe your business, going for the thing that's shiny and new and ignoring the thing that has made you successful over time is a dangerous thing to do. I think if you're reframing your business, you're imagining a future which is going to be successful. Don't throw out the things that have made you successful in the past. I think if you're in a position where you cannot see your legacy business succeeding, you're probably in the act of going bust. And to your point, if you have leaders in business nowadays who don't do digital, they've probably been retired. And it's 500 years of capitalism has taught us 9 out of 10 new businesses go bust. It's brutal. And to go back to the leadership question, the leadership qualities, I agree, they're the same as they've ever been.
It's the funding strategies, right, as
Totally.
well, because you know, you've got to find a new business model, because the money's not going to come from thin air. So your current, as you call legacy business, can be quite a good legacy business, can generate that cash, but it's obviously down to shareholders and whether the shareholders have got appetite to invest in that change, or whether you get new external funding from elsewhere, and then those new units can grow. But if they've got a tight profit line, or even a large revenue line too early, then it will cause it to fail.
And I think agencies are feeling that more than anyone. When it comes to the model, that's the biggest conundrum we have in our industry right now, is fixing or finding a new model for agencies, because they're getting crushed when it comes to pitching, and DSPs and programmatic and everything else is moving in, and it's interesting, but how are they going to keep making their money? They've got to find new ways, and I know that all of them are agonising about that right now.
Oh, yes.
That's where I think helping people navigate that from an agency perspective is one of the most important things we can do.
Okay, so we've just got almost on time. I'd just like, before we wrap up the panel, I'd just like to ask them to give the audience some pearls of wisdom. So I'm asking them to give a tweet-length piece of advice for any budding CEOs or digital CEOs. So, Carl.
Don't just focus on the technology. Think about how this new super connected customer, somebody using desktop, mobile, TVs, tablets, whatever, are going to start interacting with your product, your brand, and your comms.
Cool,
that was under 160. That's under 160.
Jenny.
Take yourself out of your silo.
Paul.
Understand your shareholder and what he wants or she wants. Be curious and take risks.
Kathleen, you have the final word.
I've tweeted mine, so if you follow me, I'm Kitty Sachs, then you'll find it. So I've said, be brave, stay humble, don't get stuck in a vertical, collaborate commercially.
Okay, so I'd like to thank the whole panel. So that's Jenny, Kathleen, Paul and Carl. You've been fantastic. Thank you very much.
We've only just begun.